Welcome everyone to our SQ Lab webinar today. We're delighted to be hosting an in conversation with the very talented Queensland screenwriter, Anthony Mullins. Hello. Welcome. I'm Bronwyn Farden and I lead our marketing and communications team at Screen Queensland. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we live and work, and for you, Anthony, right, and pay my respects to Australia's first storytellers. And also a very happy Reconciliation Week to everybody. So today, Anthony is going to talk about his career, the journey, the twists and turns, and a theme that I think is going to emerge is pivot and change. Also, he'll talk us through some of his incredible credits, maybe some of those awesome awards that he's gathered along the way, as well as insights and experiences, and some tips and tricks and advice on how you can build your career in the screen industry. So we're going to have a chat for the first sort of 30 minutes or so, and then we'll welcome your questions, and please use the Q&A function. So just to start with, let me set the scene a little bit about Anthony. Is it weird when someone talks about you when you're like right there?
It is. I find it really weird to talk about myself, to be honest. But you know, go for it.
Don't we all? So, Anthony, it's like this is your life, isn't it? Yeah. Anthony's a multi-award-winning screenwriter and director. His work has won a Primetime Emmy, an International Digital Emmy, 2 BAFTAs, and 5 Australian Writer Guild's awards. He's led interactive projects for major film and TV projects such as Lost, Spooks, The Bourne Legacy. His short films and docos have been in incredibly prestigious film festivals around the world, such as Cannes and South by Southwest. He's worked as the creative director at Hoodlum, also with Matchbox as a TV development executive. Also script producer and script editor on numerous award-winning TV projects such as Safe Harbour, which picked up an Emmy last year. Congratulations. Also 5 Bedrooms Season 1, Nowhere Boys Season 4, and currently he has numerous original TV series concepts in development with Matchbox, Easy Tiger, and Hoodlum. Whew, that's a bit.
Jeez, how do I follow that up? Oh man.
Right, and we're done.
Yeah, see ya.
So Anthony, tell us about your career. How did you start out? Where did it all begin? And maybe take us through some of those pivots and changes that you've had.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. I know this is a really weird time, and we're in such weird and uncertain times at the moment. So, you know, as I was sort of thinking about what am I going to talk about today, you know, the idea of just dealing with that uncertainty and dealing with, you know, because, you know, we're all used to uncertain times in a sense. If you work in the arts, any sort of arts, particularly, you know, film here in Queensland, you know, it's a tough proposition. So you're used to uncertainty and instability, and it's about sort of, you know, dealing with that. So thinking about my career, I kind of, you know, realized, you know, there was a sort of theme sort of building through that as I was thinking about it, which was around the idea of, you know, just looking for opportunities as they arose and being prepared to change things up. One, you know, to take advantage of opportunities, but also just because it's creatively stimulating. Like, you know, you've got to find a way to keep yourself passionate and energized and having fun. Let's face it. But I started out in short films, much like everyone else. My first short films were very visual. Like I sort of came to. I've had this weird career, and I'm not sure I would recommend my career path to anyone. It's worked out for me. But, you know, like I started out actually as a director, and I discovered writing because I needed films to direct. And so that, you know, I didn't start out wanting to write. I came from a visual arts background, if anything.
A visual arts background, really?
Yeah. When I left school, I went and did visual arts for the first year or so, and someone handed me a video camera to do video art in that year, and that's the rest of my life. You know, I never put down the video camera. I never picked up the paintbrush ever again.
But so that was the book. It was the camera the camera that hooks in.
Absolutely, yeah. And I was already a photographer at school. I loved taking photography. That was back when you actually had to develop the film and that sort of thing. So I understood visual language and that sort of thing. So when I came to film, it was like I was a director in my head. I was like, oh yeah, I want to direct films. So I didn't really know how to write them, but I had to learn to write them so that I would have something to direct.
Right.
And so I started out making short films like everyone else does. The first film I made had no dialogue, and I won a script award for it, which was really weird.
Wow, okay, right.
And then my second film, I think, had 2 lines of dialogue. No, 1 line of dialogue. I had 1 line of dialogue.
The dialogue's your theme. You've really crafted that.
I took it slow, I took it slow at first. And then the third film I made, I think it had 5 lines of dialogue in it. And but what happened with that film, naturally all of those films are very visual.
Yeah.
And what happened with that third film was it got into the Cannes Film Festival, and it was the only Australian film in official competition that year.
Oh, wow.
Some time ago now, we're talking
about.
And
were you there? Were you there and experiencing that?
Yeah, I got a call from Cannes one night, and this guy with a French accent, Christian, was on the end of the line telling me I was in the Cannes Film Festival. And I thought it was one of my collaborators, Kia Shorey and David McGarity, who I'd made the film with. I thought it was one of them doing it, putting on an accent. So I was like, yeah, sure, you're from the Cannes Film Festival. But, so getting into that festival really turbocharged things from early on.
Yeah.
And so, and of course, everyone was like, okay, what's your feature going to be in? So I was working on feature film ideas because, of course, I wasn't prepared when I went to Cannes. I didn't have a feature in my pocket.
Right.
I was still learning how to write. So while I was working on feature film ideas, I sort of pivoted to making documentaries because in Queensland at that time, there wasn't a lot of production. And so, documentary was one of the things, there was a lot of that happening around the place. Mm-hmm. And so I made several documentaries for ABC and SBS. Mm-hmm. And, they were about things like religious cults. Like I had an aunt who was in a religious cult, and so I made a doco about that.
Wow.
Andrew Leovold and Trash Video. I don't know if any of you remember.
I remember Trash Video.
Andrew's the doco maker himself now. It's a really good one. And I made a doco about his crazy video store, Trash Video, which is a fantastic place.
It was in the Valley, and then it was in West End, and
That's right.
Yeah. Yes, I remember.
It's such a great place. And an Elvis Presley festival, I made a doco about that. And so they're all quite eccentric, weird documentaries. But in amongst all of that, I met up with Tracy Robertson, Nathan Mayfield, because, they were part of the scene. And they got me to make a couple of docos for them. And we really enjoyed working together. And which led to the next pivot in my career, I guess, which was where I pivoted to doing interactive stuff for Hoodlum. And, it was going to be a one-off contract that I did for them. And the next thing I knew, I'd been there for 7 years because
wow.
And what they were doing was they needed someone to write and direct these online spin-offs that they were making for international TV shows. So and these were big shows. That's an amazing thing about Tracy and Nathan. They walk through doors that no one else would think to walk through.
Right.
And they got these contracts to write these online, make these online spin-offs of shows like Lost. Like Lost at that time was the biggest show in the world.
Huge.
And we were making this sort of spin-off of it in this pokey little office in Brisbane. So, we're all sort of pinching ourselves. And I did that sort of stuff for, 7 years or so. And, it went really well. We won a bunch of Emmys, BAFTAs and Augie Awards, those sorts of things. But what it did, because, they're all really big shows, I really had to immerse myself in the writing of those shows. I had to read the scripts and understand, okay, how's the story working? How does this show work? How do I create an online spin-off of it that people can interact with? So I really, really immersed myself in TV writing, and I kind of fell in love with TV writing at that point. And I kind of, my focus on directing it, my focus sort of went on to writing at that point, where it was like, I just really want to understand how this works, and I really immersed myself in it. And so sort of pivoted again,
right,
doing television writing. And so I did some shows with Hoodlum where, we did Slide all those years ago, Strange Calls. I worked on, Daly's first TV show, which is fantastic fun. And it was really hard to emulate Daly's voice, I have to tell you. Like writing episodes, Daly's voice is so unique. That was a challenge, but
that's Daly Pearson.
Daly Pearson, yeah, of course. And I worked on the early days of Secrets and Lies when we was just sort of throwing around the idea.
Right.
And at a certain point, I left Hoodlum because I wanted to get out and sort of start writing my own shows rather than making others. And I got quite a lot of interest in the shows that I was developing, and I started shopping them around, and Matchbox picked up a couple of my shows that I pitched to them, and they really liked them. And one of them almost got made, but it fell over at the last minute because it was a show about a family who were on witness protection, and it was sort of a family relationship drama around witness protection, sort of a light touch show. And Matchbox, well, it was sort of funny and sort of dramatic at the same time. And Matchbox really loved it, and they took it to Seven, and Seven really loved it, and they went, "Hey, this is great fun." And then Hiding came out on the ABC, which was a show about witness protection, and that was just dead overnight. But that process of writing that show and pitching it, and I had a couple of others as well, it introduced me to lots of companies. And off the back of that, Matchbox said, "Hey, can you come and run, we want to open an office in Brisbane.
Wow.
Come and run that for us, because we know you can write, we know you can develop stuff, we know you've got a brain for this sort of thing." And, off the back of that, we discovered, my job was to find stuff to make in Queensland. And I was blessed when Simon Kennedy and Phil Ankelmeyer walked through the door with a one-page pitch for this idea about a group of Australians at sea, and they come across a refugee vessel. And that became Safe Harbour.
And Safe Harbour is incredible. I mean, how amazing to have an idea like that come to you.
I'm so blessed.
How does that feel then when it comes as an idea? Is that enough? Like, what happens next?
It's sort of like, it's this instinct that you sort of have after a while. Like if you do this long enough, you get an instinct for what makes a good story, I guess. And with Safe Harbour, it sort of came through the door. And at that time, we'd all been trying, lots of people have been trying to make a show about refugees in Australia, because it was such a massive issue at a social level. But it was really hard to tell a story that didn't feel like it was a didactic, this is how you should be, or, or something worthy or earnest or whatever. And, a few people had tried. I'd read lots of pitches over the years, but no one had sort of cracked it. And this pitch came through the door, and as soon as I read it, I think I read the tagline. I didn't even have to read the whole page. I just knew this was the one.
Oh, wow.
Because it was a situation that was inherently dramatic. It was dramatic first. It was a situation that anyone could imagine themselves in. You're on a boat. Another boat is a boat of another group of people. Their boat is sinking. To bring them on board your boat will put you at risk. What are you going to do? And it was just a fantastic, simple distillation of all of the complex issues that we were grappling with socially in Australia around, how to treat refugees. And so it made it really relatable. It made it really dramatic first. It wasn't about the issue. It was about the dramatic situation that those people found themselves in. And it made it tangible and emotional as well. So it wasn't sort of this, let me teach you a lesson about whatever. It was just an emotional, dramatic story. And if
relatable immediately too. What would you do? What would you do? Exactly.
Yeah. And so, we springboarded off that and developed Safe Harbour, and it immediately, everyone who read it kind of went, of course, that's the way in to, and you can tell both, you can have conflicted interesting, complex characters on both sides, because no one really knows what to do in that situation. It's messy and it's very human and very grounded. And so the idea, you know, it's a really good example of a pitch which really, you can capture it very succinctly in like, I mean, this is something that, you know, the listeners might want to try at a later stage when we're talking, but Tim Hobart at Matchbox taught me this trick about, you know, figuring out, you know, when have you got a good idea? And Tim always reckoned that if he had an idea, he would write it down and he'd try and describe it in 27 words. And if he couldn't describe it in 27 words and still have it sound good, he knew that there was a problem with it. But if it still sounded good in 27 words, you knew you were onto something.
Right.
And like I asked him, why 27 words? And he said, I don't know. It just is. It's just 27 words in.
The secret sauce.
And it's sort of, and you know, I still use it. Like he pitched. So Tim Hobart made the first 2 seasons of Wanted. He developed it essentially after the idea came in the door, and he would, you know, instantly he was able to pitch that show in 27 words. It was really easy, you know, 2 women on the run, bag of money, couple of guys after them, you know, the good guys and the bad guys are after these women. It was just there straight away. And it was the same with Safe Harbor. And even now when I'm developing shows, or when a show is pitched to me, I try and distill it down into that line. And it's sort of, you know,
it's about discipline, isn't it? Like being disciplined with the story, the idea, and getting it to its simplest and purest doorway, maybe into the bigger.
Like, and it's funny. Like, I don't think you can do it with every idea. Like something like a movie like Moonlight. Okay, what a perfect film! Like far out, just a beautiful piece of art in the world. I'm not sure you could distill Moonlight down to 27 words. Maybe you could actually. It is kind of.
Is it good for TV? Is that approach great for TV because it sort of unlocks, I guess, the start of a story which you're interested in following?
Well, it works for film and TV, but it, you know, it's not a poetic approach. I guess it's it's like you don't. It's very hard to capture the poetry of an idea.
Yes.
In 27 words.
Yeah.
You can certainly capture emotion.
Yeah.
You can certainly capture a sense of drive in the narrative and a sense of the characters, but no poetry. So, you know, a film like Moonlight might not sound very good when you distill it down, but it should still be made because it's amazing.
So you talked about Safe Harbor there, where you were script editor, is that right? Script producer?
Yeah, I was the script editor, and I was the development. I developed the show for Matchbox.
So what's that like, taking on someone else's idea or concept and then having that responsibility of bringing a team to it and developing it further? Like, how do you approach that sort of task?
When it's someone else's idea?
Yeah.
Oh, it's, I think the first part of it is figuring out, getting everyone on the same page as to what sort of show we're making. So, you know, what's the genre, what's the feel, what's the tone of this show? And that's just a series of conversations, I guess, where you're sitting down and you're going through the show in a lot of detail. What I've found happens quite often with shows when we're developing them in a writer's room is the first 2 days are usually brainstorming. If you're lucky, you get 3 days to brainstorm. But usually it's 1 or 2, which is kind of insane in Australia, but that's just the way it is.
Okay.
And of course, we do a lot of brainstorming outside of the writer's room, but, you know, and you sit around and it can be a quite structured thing, but like there's a lot of talk around characters. I think a lot of Australian writers, we like to talk about characters a lot. We like to really dig into characters and know them. Like I know that, you know, Belinda Chaco, who wrote Safe Harbor, it was characters. She really needed to understand who the people were that she was inhabiting as she was writing, so that she talked about it as like getting inside the head of the character, being able to see through their eyes, so understand the world through their eyes. So a lot of Australian writers that I've worked with, they love talking about characters for quite a long time. Other writers, though, that I've worked with would, you know, they're more, like someone like Tim Hobart, I think, is more plot orientated, where it's like, okay, what are the beats of this story?
Right.
How's it going to evolve? How's the conflict going to escalate? And it all comes down to what sort of story you're telling. Some stories are more character sort of focused, others are more plot orientated, and same with genres as well. So those initial conversations are all about figuring out where your show sits on those continuums. You know, is this more a character-driven show? Is it more plot? What's the genre? How funny is it? How dark is it? What are the extremes of it?
And do you then also have that sort of responsibility for the broadcaster as well? Like, are you kind of nurturing the story in this one space, but you're also thinking about the delivery and what the expectations are from the broadcaster? Like, how do you manage those sort of two bodies of work, or two groups of stakeholders even, or artists or creators?
It's a lot of a script producer job. It's not a job that all writers want to do.
Okay.
Because you end up between, your job sits halfway between the writers who are sort of doing the creative, and then the producers and the broadcasters who are doing the you know, or delivering a show to an audience and on budget and, you know, on schedule and those sorts of things, on tone, brand, all of those sorts of things. And you're in the middle. And so you're working with the writers, but then you kind of also report to the producers and broadcasters around how things are going. You know, is it going to be the show that we wanted it to be?
Yeah.
And it's a tricky balancing act sometimes, I think. And it's not all writers, like a lot of writers do script producing once and then they go, never again. Because their heart is with the writing. But over the years, I've sort of worked in enough areas that I kind of, like, I came from directing, so I understand the production and the scheduling and all of those sorts of things, and the broadcaster expectations. And I understand that stuff, but I also love the writing, so I can kind of sit in between. I've also been a bit blessed with the productions I've worked on too. Like Safe Harbour was just a dream run in terms of everyone was on the same page really, really quickly. The broadcaster, you know, the creators, Simon and Phil, you know, the writers who were brought on board, Belinda and Matt, Cameron, we were all just on the same page. We were all telling the same story. And so it was just, that was a pleasure to be a part of that team and sort of move it forward. Same on 5 Bedrooms. Like 5 Bedrooms is just so much fun to write. And to be, I didn't write any of the episodes, but I was there through that whole process of developing the show, getting it through its first season. And it's just such a pleasure because, you know, Michael Lucas and Christine Bartlett had just made this beautiful show, and Hoodlum really knew, you know, what show they wanted to make, and the broadcaster was on board with that. And like working in the room with Michael and Christine it was like watching TV every day, because they worked in a really funny way where they would inhabit the characters.
Right.
So they'd act out stuff to you all the time. It's like, oh, I know, what about this scene where... And then they'd get up and just start acting it out. And so it was like you're watching the show all day, watching little scenes. It's like, oh, that's funny. Yeah, let's do that.
And then you have to crack the whip and go right back to work.
Oh, they were very disciplined, those two. Like, you know, it was a total pleasure. So I've been a bit spoiled. I'm waiting for, you know, my train wreck sort of project where it's like, oh my God, I never want to be a script producer ever again.
What about your projects, and how do you work on your own projects, and what's your process, and how do you maintain or keep lots of ideas or projects on the go? How do you approach that work?
Well, I'm sort of I'm very disciplined about it. I think in a way, like once I discovered writing, I think it was the thing I was looking for my whole life. You know, it's an itch I can't stop scratching now. I just, you're always having ideas. You're reading a newspaper, you're reading a book, you're watching a TV show, you're having a conversation with someone, you're having a walk, whatever, and ideas just come to you, and I kind of know what I can do with them now.
Right.
Whereas, you know, if you sort of haven't done that hard work on, you know, developing projects and thinking them through and understanding how to do it, you know, ideas can just kind of slip by. And I literally have a notebook that I keep random ideas in. I also have a spreadsheet. This is really embarrassing.
Oh, a spreadsheet, an Excel spreadsheet. Excellent.
Each project idea that I think, yeah, there's something in that, you know, it passes the 27-word test, let's say that.
Uh-huh.
I put it on a line in the spreadsheet, and it's like, this is the title. I think it's a TV show. This is who I think I can pitch it to. Here's the synopsis in 27 words. Here is, you know, in this column, you know, this is where the thing is up to. It's like, it's either an idea or a proposal, or I've got a Bible or I've got a pilot, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I sort of track all of my ideas, and honestly, like, the spreadsheet has like hundreds of ideas in there.
Oh gosh.
And like 99% of them are just terrible ideas. But there's something to them. And so I keep track of them, because sometimes, and this has happened a number of times, where I've circled back to an idea, sometimes years later.
Right.
And it's like, there was something in that, and it makes sense to me now, in the world that I'm in now, or, you know, I've finally understood what this idea is about. And that's a mysterious thing about writing, I think. It's one of the things I love about it, that it's, you write to discover things. Like, you write to understand things. It's not like you understand it at the beginning. You're interested in it, you're curious about it, but the process of writing something, the process of unraveling the puzzle of this story, you know, at a certain point, hopefully, it offers up an insight into what you're actually writing about. And hopefully it's a fresh sort of idea that you hadn't thought of, but that you realize you've been grappling with the whole time. And, you know, we had that on Safe Harbor. You know, we knew what the idea of that show was. It was really dramatic, and we knew we were really interested in it, but we didn't really know what the show was about until quite late in the process.
Right.
And eventually, you know, the whole room, we were able to articulate it. You know, this is, you know, what do we, you know, the idea, we sort of boiled it down to, and it might not make sense unless you've sort of seen the whole show, but it's like, what do we owe each other as human beings? You know, that really resonated with us as a team. It's like, what do we owe each other? The fact that we are in each other's worlds. And, you know, and a question like that doesn't have a simple yes or no answer.
No.
It's complex, you know. And so that's the sort of, I guess that's the, like, in my head, it feels like every story idea is just like this little puzzle. It's in my head. It's a little jigsaw puzzle that I haven't finished. And I want to finish it. And so I keep coming back to these ideas. You know, some of them never move. Some of them are just terrible ideas that you shouldn't come back to. But enough of them. Well, see, I never delete them. That's the thing. Don't delete them.
Okay.
No way. Don't delete them. Keep them all, because there's a pattern to it. You know, there are things that you're obviously thinking about. Like, I look back at things I was thinking about 20 years ago from my old notebooks and stuff. It's like, that's in what I'm doing now. It's always been there.
And so that's a lot of ideas. That's a lot of things that you're keeping track of. There's probably a lot of rejection and no's in all of those.
Oh my God. Yes.
How do you maintain like momentum and like that positivity to keep going? How can you sustain that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, particularly in these times where, you know, it's so tough at the moment. It's never been tougher, but it's, you know, in a way it's always been tough. Getting through that rejection. It's a big part of it, I think, is having a group of people around you. Like, none of us can do this alone. It's a very collaborative art form, but also just emotionally. You can't do this alone. You've got to find your people. You've got to find your supporters. You've got to find your backers, people who believe that even if you're even if you're not doing it at the moment, they believe you can do it eventually, that you'll get there with whatever the project is that you're working on, or whatever the slate of ideas that you're working on, that you have the dedication and talent and to sort of get through to the other side, because there is an enormous amount of rejection in this industry, like it, and it's hard not to take it personally.
Of course.
But it's like 99% of, well, actually, virtually every time, it's not personal. It's just that, you know, sometimes the idea doesn't fit with, you know, whatever a person's slate is, or, you know, the budget's not going to work, or it's just not right now. Maybe it'll be right later, but it's just not right now. And so finding a way to pick yourself up and keep going. And in fact, like just the other day, like, you know, I had a knockback that I didn't see coming, and it's sort of like, so you go for a walk, you have a bit of a think about it, and it's okay to mourn it for a while and sort of, you know, kind of go, you know, because you want to be realistic about this stuff. Like, it does hurt, but like, so, you know, mourn it, talk it over with people that, you know, your inner circle, the people that you trust and who read your stuff and believe in you. But then find something else. And, you know, and I go to my slate. It's like, okay.
Spreadsheet, go back to the spreadsheet.
Go back to the spreadsheet and say, okay, so what else is on here? And then I see an idea and I say, that idea, that is great. And then I'm thinking about that rather than thinking about the rejection I just got.
Right.
And it gives you the impetus to move forward and, you know, get on with work. You can't wallow on this stuff. And also, I mean, I think a big bit of advice that I would give to people is don't just have one project.
Right.
If you're serious about writing, developing ideas, have a slate. You know, have a bunch of ideas that you're just pushing forward and at various points, moving them along. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. You know, because you're going to be disappointed.
I think I have one more question before we open it up to our audience, and I guess this is about you've written a PhD, or you're writing a PhD. Is that?
Oh, I did a PhD. Years ago. Yeah. In amongst the other stuff, it took me like 10 years to do it. Like, I took every leave of absence I've.
And I understand that is that you investigated the hero's journey and whether in fact it is a formula that works or is relevant anymore. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you believe is in fact the way to write or tackle your stories for screen?
Well, it's like at the moment I've got I've been commissioned to write a book about screenwriting, and it was because I was running these workshops last year, and everyone who's doing the workshop said, you know, you should really write down that stuff that you were talking about in your workshops. And it was all sort of based on the PhD that I'd done, where I looked at all the various approaches to screenwriting, read all the screenwriting books as part of the sort of methodical process of doing a PhD, talked about their approaches, then, you know, did a critique of it. And the book I've been commissioned to write it's called Beyond the Hero's Journey. And it's sort of a critique. No, it's not sort of, it's definitely a critique of the 3-act hero's journey, which, you know, I've used myself. It's a useful starting point for thinking about story, because it's a common approach to storytelling. And a lot of people say it's the only approach to storytelling. And I would strongly say, no, it's a approach to storytelling. But for those who aren't familiar with it, you know, a traditional 3-act hero's journey, it's in essence, it's about a character who is confronted with a conflict, and the struggle that they face trying to overcome that conflict, that struggle changes them at an emotional level. So they do something at the end of the story that they could not do at the beginning of the story. And it leaves them with a better life. You know, they have an optimistic arc. Things work out fine. And, you know, so a movie like Star Wars is, you know, something that people always reference. But, you know, a movie like Lady Bird, she definitely changes in that story. You know, it has an optimistic arc. Things are things are looking, better for her emotionally. So Moonlight has, it's got that sense of change and that sense of optimism at the end of it. Jojo Rabbit, same sort of thing. Do they break up into 3 acts? I'll get back to that. I'll circle back to that in a second. But what I would contend is, sure, some films kind of fit that sort of feeling of emotional change and optimism, but there's a hell of a lot of films that don't.
Yeah.
Like the vast majority of films, don't fit those strict structures. They don't always have to be about a change character who has an optimistic ending. So like there's lots of great films, and a lot of these are classics, that have that don't have an optimistic arc. So something like The Social Network, that is not an optimistic arc. Like that's a deeply ambivalent arc. Like he is not in a good place at the end of that story. Portrait of a Lady on Fire, it is such a beautiful film, but those characters are not resolved at the end. Things are very ambivalent for them. Even Terminator, like something as Hollywood as Terminator, and people would talk about Terminator fitting into a 3-act hero's journey all the time. It's a very ambivalent world that Sarah Connor's going into at the end of that story. Like she knows the fucking apocalypse is approaching. Jesus, like it's not optimistic. Sure, she changes, but and then there's
happy ending.
yeah. But then there's classics like The Godfather. I mean, that's a seriously pessimistic ending to that story. Sure, he changes, but far out, it's not pretty. So you've got these different sort of endings to the film which don't fit the hero's journey, and a lot of these are classic films. But of course, if you think about it at the level of character as well, it's like not all characters change in a film. Like Erin Brockovich, does Erin Brockovich emotionally change? No, she changes everyone around her. She is a force of nature. Moana, more recently, like Moana's character in that beautiful film, she changes everyone around her. She changes her community. That they want to explore the world. I guess what I'm saying is, my book is about discovering the unique shape of your story that you're trying to tell, rather than trying to fit it into a predetermined formula. Because what I'm contending is that, locking yourself into one type of story, like a 3-act hero's journey, sort of locks the world out.
Okay.
You're not really seeing the world as it is. You're kind of looking at the world in a blinkered way where all characters have to change and all stories have to have an optimistic sort of angle to them at the ending. For me, I think an artist's job is to offer up new ways of seeing the world, seeing the world as it really is, and challenging the way we see the world with new insight, and there's plenty of fantastic films that do exactly that. And, they don't fit the 3-act hero's journey. All right, that's my rant.
Great rant. When is the book?
My book isn't so ranty. It's a little bit, I hope not. I haven't finished it yet. It's due in July.
Ooh.
It's like, far out.
Deadline. Eek.
Deadline.
So I think it's a great time to open this up to questions from our audience now. And I guess also feel free if you want to put your 27-word or less pitch into the Q&A section, and we'll read a few out. Hopefully we get a few. No pressure if you don't feel like that's for you. But I do have a question.
I'm blowing my nose. I don't have COVID. Okay, I'm just blowing my nose.
Okay, so we've got a question from Tam Sainsbury. What are your thoughts on the future of relationship dramas such as 5 Bedrooms with our commercial broadcasters in relation to quotas and diminishing viewers?
In relation to quotas and diminishing viewers. Hey, this is a tough time with quotas being turned off in the meantime, and if that happens long term for drama, the number of dramas that will be made in Australia will diminish enormously. The commercial proposition for the commercial broadcasters to make those shows will be that they won't really have a great commercial reason to make them. Some of them will be made. Like Foxtel has said, we're going to still keep making things even though we don't have to, and 10 has said that, but 7 and 9 have pretty much said they don't want to. In terms of relationship dramas, there's kind of two questions in this. Like, in terms of relationship dramas, my hunch is that there might be a bit of a taste for an appetite for something warm and comforting after the last few months.
Yes.
So dark, genre pieces like Underbelly, or there's sort of not going to be so much of an appetite for that. There will be an appetite for it always because there's so much TV to watch. But I think there will be a renewed interest in, sort of family relationship dramas and those sorts of things where it's about seeing people working stuff out on an everyday relatable level. And Foxtel has even said that that one of their shows that they had in development, they said they've gone back and had a look at it to sort of take into account the mood, the perceived mood that might be there in a post-COVID world.
And is that something you think writers and development, screen creators should be thinking about right now? Where's the market heading? What's the audience looking for? Like starting to pivot some of those ideas that you've got in your Excel spreadsheet to sort of respond?
Yeah, well, like it's a tricky balance. You don't want to completely be driven by the market because you want to tell stories that you believe in, that can sustain your interest for a long time. So you've got to, the stories that you develop have to come from your heart. They've got to be something you really care about. But at the same time, it's worth knowing what the market's doing, being aware of what the market's doing, so that when the opportunity arises, you can slot your idea into that opportunity. Mm-hmm. I do think it's really important. Like all of us should be watching Australian shows and getting a sense of what Australian shows are out there, because the last thing you want to do is go to a producer or a broadcaster and pitch them something they've already got, because you will look like an idiot, and you will look like you're not paying attention, and so they'll see right through that. But watch what's out there. You don't necessarily have to like it, but it's a way of getting a sense of how people are approaching storytelling in Australia, how audiences are responding to it. And then you can kind of go back to your stuff and go, okay, where does mine fit into that? It's not about sort of reefing all of your ideas and making it fit into other people's expectations. It's just kind of being able to make an assessment as to where yours sits in relation to it.
All right, we have another question from Joseph Grogan.
Joe?
Let me quickly, what advice do you offer in transitioning from PhD into academia or industry? Oh, good question.
I think just get writing, get a slate together, start figuring out what sorts of stories you want to tell, mm-hmm. and get writing. Like it's you can sit there sort of, trying to anticipate exactly what the one path is through all of this, and you'll get old very quickly. If you just kind of have to start, I think. Start writing, start thinking up, start developing a slate of ideas that you think you want to make, and then assess the market and see where it fits into the market.
All right, next question. Should writers and filmmakers stay in their genre lane?
As in only write one sort of show?
Maybe this is about directors directing, writers writing, and people having one area of speciality. I'm interpreting here, and Goran, please add another dimension to this conversation if I've got it wrong. But
read it again.
Oh, actually, no. I think I've got it wrong. Should writers and filmmakers stay in their genre lane? So should you always stick to horror? Should you always stick to drama? Should you?
It's a really good question. It's the value of sticking to your genre lane is everyone knows what you do. You've got a voice.
Yeah.
A very specific voice. And it is important to develop a voice across your career. If your intention is to be a creator of a show or a writer of feature films, or or a director even, it's figuring out what are the sorts of stories that I want to devote my career to. Now, some people though are so good that they can just kind of their voice is so strong that they can actually swap genres. So I'm watching The Great at the moment. Okay, Tony McNamara. So for those of you who don't know, Tony McNamara is an absolute legend, Australian screenwriter. He was nominated for an Academy Award for The Favourite, an incredible film. The Great is about Catherine the Great, and it's a rude, crude, smart, funny, really ballsy portrayal of her life. And it's on Stan at the moment. And Tony McNamara is the Australian screenwriter that's developed the whole thing, and it looks amazing too. Anyway, Tony also created Dr. Doctor.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
There you go. Like, how different is Dr. Doctor to The Favourite and The Great? And he was the head writer on Puberty Blues, a sort of, dark, retro sort of teen drama. He also wrote on Tangle, relationship drama. He also wrote on Secret Life of Us. I mean, the guy just has incredible range.
Right. He
can shift genres. But you always know it's a Tony McNamara show. His voice is, so my answer is yes and no, I guess, to that question. In a way, develop your voice, sticking to a genre will help that. But, be as good as you can be. And that's what Tony McNamara has done. He's so good that he can change genres and you still know it's him.
What about you? Do you do that a lot?
Because of my background and because of I work on lots of different shows, my first job in TV, in a sense, in writing TV, was emulating Lost. So I got really good at watching shows, reading their scripts, and learning how to emulate them.
Okay.
And so I could sort of I could adopt the voice of the show. And the downside of that is no one knew what my voice was. But what emerged from that was, because one of my first experiences on Lost was in TV was writing shows like Lost, was that the sorts of shows I love to develop have very strong mystery sort of strands to them, where it's about ordinary people dealing with something very strange, very mysterious, and very perplexing, much like Lost. So I got the Lost bug, and I've never lost it. And it's so many of my shows have that feeling to them. People often kind of go, it's like a version of, it's Lost meets whatever else I'm sort of blending together. But at the same time, I've also developed lots of relationship dramas. I've had lots of relationship dramas, optioned and shopped around the place, and a lot of success with that. And it's got me lots of jobs. I think one of the reasons why, Hoodlum asked me to come and work on 5 Bedrooms was they knew I could write a relationship drama because they'd read it. For me, I guess because I'm a script producer, I'm kind of, I need to have the ability to be able to adopt a show's voice and work within that. But I guess, my particular sort of, my starting point would always be a sort of mystery sort of feel.
Okay, another question here from Sue. Andy Serkis's Imaginarium has been working with the Theatre and Magic Leap to bring stories to tabletops via AR. What opportunities do you think this brings for writers and industry?
It's a good question. I mean, I'd love to play around with AR. It'd be like Lucas Taylor, Queensland writer. He won the John Hind Award last year for an amazing science fiction feature. Basically, it's feature length, this thing, but it was a virtual reality app. And I had to play. I played it because you hold an iPad up, and you kind of move around the scene and you see it unfold. And it was a non-linear story broken up into different chapters. Fantastic. And, you know, I've worked in interactive before, and I love that sort of technology side of things. And I love playing around with that stuff and trying it out. I guess one of the questions I would have, though, about VR and AR and that sort of storytelling is, and I came across this when I was working in interactive and trying to blend games into stories, is when I started doing that, I was always like, yes, stories and games can be the same thing. I was really like, absolutely they can. And the more I did it, the more I realized, you know what, they are different things. And all the tech guys at Hoodlum who were telling me, no, you can't blend them, Anthony, they're just different things. I had to admit they were right. They really are different things. And so when you sort of use, when you try and blend those things together, the storytelling is different. And it's figuring out what sort of storytelling does AR and VR do really well. And I guess I haven't seen many mainstream examples of it yet. It's been around for a while, and everyone's saying it's all about to happen, and then it doesn't happen.
You check in with Lucas Taylor and get his insights on this one too.
Yeah. Oh, well, Lucas and I have talked about it a fair bit, and like I shouldn't sort of just say what he thinks, but like I don't want to assume what he thinks, but like we do have discussions around that, because our creative curiosity draws us to trying out stuff like that. It's a great creative challenge. I mean, how do we use this thing to tell a story? What does it do really well? What doesn't it do very well? And, you know, that's exactly what Lucas was doing very successfully with his VR project. But there are limits to it. And I guess at a certain point for me, I made a decision to step away from that sort of storytelling, because what I found was I wanted to tell longer stories. And the nature of the storytelling within VR and AR and those sort of technology and game-based things is they're quite short, because it's quite demanding on your senses being in those environments for a long period of time. So everything's always sort of broken up into little 8-minute sequences or 6-minute sequences, or, you know. And I just wanted to tell longer stories. And so like, so I decided to chase down, you know, television screenwriting, because that's as long as it gets. Let's face it, like a television story goes for hundreds of hours.
And eventually a second season and a third season.
Yeah, third and 4, 5, 6, and it goes on forever.
It's very exciting, Anthony. We've got a couple of pictures.
Oh, great.
Yes,
cool.
This is exciting. Okay, so here's a pitch from Amanda. I hope I do it justice, Amanda, so please, I'll do my best. Okay. A man exiled on a remote island after a Me Too scandal loses everything when he is finally allowed to go home.
Oh, that's intriguing.
Exiled on a remote island after a Me Too scandal loses... I'll do it one more time.
Yeah.
A man exiled on a remote island after a Me Too scandal loses everything when he is finally allowed to go home. I wonder why he's allowed to go home.
Interesting.
Exile.
Yeah. I mean, you get a sense of the story in that. It's straight away when you said exiled on a remote island, I thought he was sort of the image that came into my head, and this is a note for pitching, is
Survivor.
It's Survivor, but it was also Castaway. It was like he's marooned on a island, and so I was thinking, how does he lose more stuff if he's already marooned? But I have this feeling that Amanda possibly didn't mean for that image to pop into my head, but it did. And that's a note about pitching, I think, is finding the right language so that you put the right images in people's heads when they're hearing your pitch. It's just something that happens all the time. I know when I pitch stuff sometimes, particularly in the early days, like people get the completely wrong idea about what I'm trying to pitch. But it's a case of refining. But like, I think Amanda's got a sense of the story in there and what she wants to explore. So yeah, well done. 27 words.
All right. I didn't check, but it looks pretty bang on there. Desley, this is an animation. All right. Let me just quickly. Okay. Wild animals wash away in a flood and rescued by a zoo, only to be lost in the environment, wanting to get back to the wild. Oh, I don't think I read that very well for you, Desley. Let me try one more time. Wild animals washed away in a flood and rescued by a zoo, only to be lost in the environment, wanting to get back to the wild. Okay.
Ah, that's cool. I can kind of imagine that as like a, some sort of Pixar film or something, like where, it's these animals that are kind of stuck in a zoo now, and it's a jailbreak. There it is. Just right, let's get out of here. Let's get back to the environment.
Just to confirm, we got it right with Goran's question about genre. We interpreted that one correctly, and Amanda said yes, it is like Castaway in relation to the two ones.
Okay, well that was the right image to put in my head. That's good. Well done.
All right. Well, we're getting closer to the end. I think I've got one more question here.
It's 11 o'clock already. Jeez.
Yeah. That's gone very quickly, as you do when you're talking to a super interesting and experienced and talented screenwriter.
Very good moderating.
So one more question from Goran again. So can you tell us your experience or views on book adaptations for films or TV series? Is it becoming less or more common?
I haven't done much of it, to tell you the truth. I haven't done a lot of it, but book adaptations will continue to be popular with producers, I think, because it's got a built-in audience. Particularly if it's had good sales and buzz, or it's about something, that is buzzworthy. Absolutely, book adaptations will be sought after, I think, because it's so hard to pick a winner in this business. Incredibly hard. We're developing shows ourselves. It's like, which one of our shows is going to be the one that gets us through and gets us a job and gets us, Academy Awards and all that sort of thing? Yeah. We have no idea. But then also the people making these things, they're taking a gamble too all the time. And, so many shows just don't work the way that the people that make them, hope they would. One way of dealing with that situation, that uncertainty, is to go with a idea that already has an audience. Yeah. And you build on that. And so books are obviously one of those, and I can't see that changing anytime soon.
Okay. And have you written novels? Will you write novels? Or
I did try to write a novel once. I had this thing where I would write 300 words a day.
Uh-huh.
I forget who it was. Maybe it was Hemingway or something. He didn't write very many words each day. He only wrote like 800 words before he headed off down to the bar. And I kind of worked out, if I wrote 300 words a day for 5 days a week for a whole year, I would end up with like a 90,000 word novel. And that's a good sized novel, and I'd have a first draft that I could then go back and make good. And I got all the way to May, so I guess I had like 30,000 words. I was well on my way, and I made the mistake of reading it. And all of my motivation disappeared. So whatever you do, and this is the same with screenwriting too, actually, get to the end of the draft. Just get to the end.
Okay.
Just write and get to the end. Don't keep editing yourself, because you won't get there. Get to the end of the draft. And that's what I'm doing with the book that I've got due in July. I'm going to get to the end of the draft, and then I'll go back and read it.
Then go back. And then go back to your support crew, your tribe, your team. You
can't do this alone. You need your team. You need your supporters. Find people who will read your stuff, who are on your side. Even when you write bad, they're still on your side, who will be there for you.
Well, this brings us to 11 o'clock. So high five, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please, everyone, continue to watch our SQ Live, SQ Lab webinars. We also have SQ Live, which is where you can talk to Screen Queensland team members. We can't wait till we have the time where we can actually see people face to face again, and hopefully that's not too far away. Please make sure to subscribe to our newsletters, follow us on social media. We want you all to be applying for all the initiatives that we're rolling out. And also, thank you so much, Anthony, and thanks to all the Screen Queensland team. We're all working very hard to try and get all these fantastic initiatives out the door, and have a great team of people who are all working behind the scenes to keep it all ticking over. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks again. And join the next lab and live events online. See you all.
See you all. Thanks. Thanks, Roland. Bye-bye.